Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. The walk-in thing is ridiculous, right? Because you set up a camera, you stand in front of it, you make sure it's framed well, then you like deliberately walk out and pretend you're doing something and you just, oh, sorry guys, I'm just busy, yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the 24mm 1.4 for Sony E-Mount and the 55mm 1.8. I'll be focusing on the 24 because it's a newer lens, but I hired it out over the Christmas period, used it for a couple of weddings, and rather than talk about the sharpness and autofocus and all that lot, I'm going to be talking about how I've used the 24mm and the 55mm throughout 2 whole weddings without changing lenses at all, and why I did this. The spoiler alert is I will be buying the 24mm 1.4. So I heard a lot of good things about this lens and I decided to hire it like I do before I buy any big purchase, and I hired it from a website called Hire a Camera, which in the UK is a great place to hire out camera equipment, lenses, lighting, anything like that. I'm not sponsored by them at all, but I use them a lot to hire out all different kinds of gear before I buy it. So I hired out the 24mm 1.4 with the intention of using it with the setup I'm about to go through, and actually worked out really well. So what I'm about to sort of say is less on the sort of specifications of the lens and more about how you can use just the 24mm and the 55mm to simplify your filmmaking experience. Obviously we all love gear, we all love buying new stuff, experimenting with new stuff, but I think at weddings it's important to focus on the story, and I find myself changing lenses left, right and centre all the time. So I really wanted to use this combination to simplify the experience and just make the whole wedding day a lot easier. So a lot of this revolves around the A7 III and the crop mode that you can use on the A7 cameras. So because of that APS-C crop mode, I can crop in on the 24mm to a 35mm equivalent, and I can crop in on the 55mm to a 85-ish millimeter equivalent. And so just using these 2 lenses, I could give myself 4 different focal lengths, which is really nice. So for the whole day, I had the 24mm 1.4 on the A7 III on the Z and Weeble S, and I had the 55mm 1.8 on another A7 III in my bag, just handheld, ready to go whenever I needed it. So I had one on a gimbal and one handheld. And I used this setup for an entire wedding, except the ceremony and the speeches, because I like a bit more versatility. So I use my Tamron zooms for the ceremonies and the speeches, just so I can zoom out and zoom in when I need to, because you don't really know what's happening at that point. So what this setup did is it gave me a lot of versatility with different focal lengths without me having to change lenses all of the time and just worry about, you know, what focal lengths I'm shooting at. If I'm shooting on the gimbal, I've got the 24 and the 35 ready to go, and if I'm shooting handheld, I've got the 55 and the 85 ready to go. So I can literally switch between them at any time, and whatever I wasn't using, I had stored in my Peak Design Everyday Sling, which I carry around at a wedding all the time. This allowed me to focus much more on the story, much more on what I was capturing, and there was a lot more positives than negatives. Okay, so some of you might say that cropping into these lenses is bad because you don't get as much depth of field, and obviously this is partially true, but if you look at a video by Chris Turner Photography on YouTube, which is a really good YouTuber, he talks about comparing the differences between the 24mm 1.4 in crop mode to the 35mm 1.8 in full frame mode, and what the differences are. And personally, I don't think the differences are big enough to warrant the change in lens in the middle of a wedding. And so on a wedding day, you're not going to notice that you've lost a tiny bit of depth of field there, especially when the pros are that you're not changing lenses as much and you're focusing more on the shots that you're doing rather than the focal length you're using, I guess. There's also, I know a lot of people who like to shoot with a 70-200 at weddings, and obviously that's your own personal preference as well. The Most telephoto I shoot at weddings is 85. If I had a 70-200, I probably would shoot on it. I'm looking at the 75 to 180 Tamron, I think it is, that's coming out this year. So I might give that a try when it comes out. But at the moment, the tightest I shoot is 85, and also I shoot in a lot of sort of small dark rooms, so 85 is normally more than enough for UK weddings. I also thought I'd miss going a bit wider, so I used my Tamron 17-28, which is on now, for those wide shots of the venue and shots of the ceremony setup and things like that. Obviously with this setup, the 24 and the 55, the widest I had was 24. I didn't miss the 17 at all, which is strange because when I switched from the 16-35 to the 17-28, I actually missed that 1mm there. But using the 24, I didn't miss going up to 17 whatsoever really, which surprised me. But I think it was more to do with the fact that I could walk into a room with a setup that I already had and get the shot instantly and walk straight back out. Whereas normally it involves going into the room, changing lens to Tamron, balancing the gimbal, getting the shot, coming back to the other lens, balancing the gimbal again and going back out. And so that sort of ease of use, I think, is why I didn't miss the 17mm. So yeah, just going back to the positives, it obviously helps you focus on the story. I'm not changing lenses at weddings anymore, apart from during the ceremony and the speeches. I'm not rebalancing the gimbal. My Weebill S is already set up all the time for the 24mm, and so it just helps so much in, you know, reducing that load, because at a wedding, the least stress you can have, the better. So the more you know about the wedding day, the less equipment you have to think about, and the less sort of gear changes and things like that you have to do in the middle of the day, the better. Which is why I use Sony a7 IIIs, because I don't have to worry about autofocus. The batteries last most of the day. I have 4 batteries, 2 for each camera, and they last me the entire day. And now with this 2-lens setup also, it just, you know, makes the day so much smoother. I just wanted to share that with you guys of how I've used these 2 lenses together to create a nice little setup for weddings and events videography. Okay, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to use this video about the 24mm 1.4, not to talk about the specs of it, but how you can really utilize it along with other lenses to minimize your setup. You still get really nice depth of field with the 1.4 and the 1.8 on the 55, and it can be translated not just to weddings but also to travel films. You could travel with an a7 III in just 2 lenses and get those 4 different focal lengths, which is really nice. If you like this kind of video, give it a thumbs up, and if you've got any opinions or comments, obviously leave them down below and I'll try and get back to them as quick as I can. And if you want to see more videos like this on sort of lifestyle videography gear tips, then please do subscribe, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.